Shalom, everybody. In this episode, we're going to get into something a little bit different, something that I feel that just needs to have the record set straight. This story is about, or this episode is dealing with the Sumerians and what has been taught to the world about them and who these people are. And I felt it was incumbent upon me in terms of my testimony to kind of set the record straight because of the first being the last, or let me get it right, where he says the first shall be last and the last shall be first. Okay. And this is kind of where this thing pretty much it kind of just kind of it stands on that principles to a degree. And so first let's get into who are the Sumerians. Let's go to who are the Sumerians and what we know about them in terms of history. Now they said the Sumerians called themselves the black-headed people or the black-headed ones, because that's what Sumerian words sagiga literally means to translate head and black. And this is the AI interview. And it's pretty deep because the Sumerians, he says, we can infer that black-headed means their hair based on two things: the status that they left behind depicting themselves with black beard, hair, and pale skin and blue eyes. Now, if somebody had black head, why wouldn't they say black hair people? And maybe you say, well, that's a foolish question that they're black-headed. And from what I understand, looking at the depiction of these people, let's look at it. Let's test that for us just for a second before we get started. And that's why I said a lot of history has been whitewashed, and we all know this, right? Now, how is it that you can detect pale skin and black hair? Look at these things. Particularly this depiction. Wait a minute, this depiction here. Where's their hair? This is supposed You see how ridiculous that sounds? This is ancient pottery from them, identifying themselves as Sumerians, but it's because of their hair, pale skin, and blue eyes. Show me, you see any blue eyes in there? And look at all of these other ones. Where is it anywhere? Look at these guys with the hats on. Where's the black hair? Where's the black hair? That's a drawing. Don't count. But you see where I'm going with this? This is a situation where I don't know where they would get blonde hair and blue eyes. There was no photographs in those days. These are all depictions. They were not even, listen, they didn't even know how to, I would say read, but in terms of the culture in there, only the Sumerians did. So let's get that straight. But they were learning to writing. This is what the introduction to writing and reading and all of that. So there was no photographs. So how could you say that these people had blonde hair and blue eyes and pale skin? You have no idea what you're talking about. Neither do any of their texts tell you that they had blonde hair and blue eyes, especially if they're identifying themselves as the black-headed people. They just didn't want to mean black-faced people. Who were the black-headed Sumerians? Ancient Sumerians were the black-headed ones, lived in the southern part of what is known as now Iraq. The heartland of Sumer lay between the Euphrates and the Tigris River and what the Greeks later called Mesopotamia. So this is where we're going to get into the scriptures and how that relates to it. But who are the black-headed Sumerians? Sumerians were ancient people who lived in the southern part of Mesopotamia. All right, now He said, now the Sumerians were inventive and may have developed the first writing system. They recorded their language using simple pictures before 3000 BCE. Okay, and they were basically a pagan civilization, as we'll get into the scriptures about that now. But we see that now that they've identified, and this is something that they back up by their ancient historian called Herodotus. You probably read about him or heard about him and how he described the Sumerians as these people as well, the black-headed people. And he said, now the Chaldeans of Babylon, the black-headed people. So that's another thing that should let you know what we're talking about here. The Chaldeans of Babylon and the black-headed Sumerians. So that don't mean more. That how many Europeans do you know that have jet black hair? There's some, yes, it is. Some Italians and a few and all that. That's not casting any dispersions on anybody. It's just to be identified by that, as particularly in that area. You know what I mean? That's if that was the land allotted to them, and we'll get into that in a minute, then the people that lived in that land now would kind of represent that. And then you kind of see that with Muslims, with Arabs, I should say. I say Muslims, but Arabs. Arabs in there, they have a lot of like. Let's look at what we consider a modern Arab, right? Right. So you can see the black hair. You can see the black hair a little bit. Well, yes, you can see some black hair in it. Okay. Now, these people are supposed to be descendants of Abraham, right? Through Ishmael, right? So that means that Abraham would have had to have black hair too then, right? And these are his descendants. And we'll get into how the pigmentation a little later. So let's get into the scriptures concerning that. All right. Now, let's look at what the scriptures say about the black-headed people. First, we're going to start at the beginning, because we really can't go before the flood. We can only go to after the flood. And we know that the scriptures do not leave out anyone. Every culture, every civilization is recorded somewhere in scripture. The beginning, the deeds of these people, the culture, the civilization, all of that is recorded. The wars everywhere. I can say everywhere, but they're recorded in some either what we call the Book of Yashar, which was normally called the Book of Wars. That's why when you read about it in Joshua and Samuel, they're talking about in the context of going to war. All right, and he lists all of those things, but it all starts. So we're going to look at the flood, and we're going to start civilization, because that's really where all of the cultures around the world agree that there was a great deluge. So let's start there. So we're looking at the sons of Noah. And he said, and the sons of Noah that went forth out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham is the father of Canaan. And why would they add that? Why would they add the three sons and then throw Canaan in, who was a grandson, when all of them had grandsons? Why is that name so, I don't know, why was it so important to mention that name? We'll get into that in a minute. Well, at any rate, so let's get to the story of how the Sumerians came to be. Now, the Sumerians came to be after the flood, particularly in this land we call Mesopotamia, right? Look at this land, Mesopotamia. Tigris River. All right, let's get a little better. Let's get a little better view. Let's get a little better. Where were we? Okay, here we go. All right. That's not the one I want either. There you go. So let's look into that area here. This is the land between the two rivers. That doesn't even quite cut it either. So let's go to Let's go to here and find out Mesopotamia. Okay. Now look at that. Let's look at this. Let's look at this in the images. So this was the land between two rivers. I don't know if I needed to go into that. Maybe I'll just go backwards. Let's just go back. So this is ancient Mesopotamia. This is the land of the Sumerians. See? They say the Elamites, Persians, Assyrians, Hittites. Very significant, the Hittites. Especially if you know the story of Esau and the families he moved and married into, and this being Mount Seir. But that's getting off on a tangent. So let's stay on course. Now, if we're looking at that, let's go to the story of the beginning and who these people were according to the scriptures. Okay? Now, only way we can do that is we have to go to the beginning, and I think this is the only book that will give you that. This is the Book of Jubilees. Now, the Book of Jubilees says that this is the history of the division of the days of the Torah and the testimony of the events of the years and their year weeks, because the Jubilee is 49 years and the Jubilee year is the 50th. So it's basically intervals of 50 years, 7 weeks, 7 times 7 weeks. And it says the festivals of the covenant and their Shabbats and their Jubilees throughout all the years of the world. So he's going back to the beginning. As Yahweh spoke to Moshe, people say, well, you know, where was these accounts? Because that's where you look at. They look at a lot of the things written from the Sumerians, and which, you know, their authenticity is without question. Everybody knows that these are ancient, the cuneiform and all of these tablets that they're finding, Enlil and Inky and all that crap. Well, at any rate, when we look at all of that, according to the scriptures, we understand that these people, you know, they were learned. They were, we'll get into that in a second too. I got a lot of stuff to kind of just putting down and kicking down the road until we can grab hold of it later. But at any rate, let's continue so we can build up to where I've been going with all of that, you know, deferring certain particulars. Well, anyway, he says now, Moshe went up to Mount Sinai when he went up to receive the tables of the Torah of the commandment, according to the voice of Yahweh, as he said to him, go up to the top of the mountain. So he went up there, and this is where he showed Moses all of, you know, the beginning. This is where Moses gets his testimony, where he shows you everything in the word through the law and the Torah and everything else that he showed us. And he gets into it a little deep. This is why I'd be remiss if I didn't read this part. He said, it came to pass in the first year of the exodus of the children of Israel that came out of Egypt, in the 3rd month and the 16th day of the month, that Yahweh spoke to Moshe and said, come up to me on the mountain. I will give you 2 tables of stone of the Torah and the commandment which I have written, that you may teach them. And Moshe went up to the mount of Yahweh. And the splendor of Yahweh abode on Mount Sinai, and a cloud overshadowed it 6 days. And he called Moshe on the 7th day out of the midst of the cloud. And the appearance of the splendor of Yahweh was like a flaming fire at the top of the mount. And Moshe was on the mountain 40 days, 40 nights. And Yahweh told him earlier the later testimony of the division of all the days of the Torah and the testimony. And he said, incline your heart to every word which I shall speak to you on this mount, and write them in a book, in order that the generations may see how I have not forsaken them for all the evil which they have wrought in transgressing the covenant which I established between me and you, and for their generations this day on Mount Sinai. And thus it will come to pass that when all these things come upon them, that they will recognize that I am more righteous than they in their judgments and in all their actions, and they will recognize that I have been truly with him, and I have been truly with him. And do you write for yourself all of these words, which I declare to you this day. For I know their rebellion and their stiff neck, because I bring them into the land which I swore to their fathers, Abraham and Yitzhak, and to Jacob, or Yakub, and saying unto your seed, I will give a land with flowing with milk and honey. And they will eat and be satisfied, and they will turn to strange gods. See that? This is the key to all of our history. And that doesn't matter, Yehudi or Jew or Gentile. And he says, now eat, they will eat and be satisfied, they will turn to strange gods, gods which cannot deliver them from aught of their tribulation. And this witness shall be heard for a witness against them. For they will all forget all my commandments, and I commanded them, and all that I commanded them, even all that I commanded them, and they will walk after the Gentiles. So in this particular text, there was no whitewashing of it. They mentioned a distinction between us and the Gentiles. And after their uncleanness, and after their shame, and we will serve their gods, and will serve their gods. And these will prove unto them an offense and a tribulation, unto affliction and a snare. And many will perish, and they will be taken captive. I've had to pause there, let that sink in. Many will perish, and they will be taken captive, and will fall into the hands of the enemy, because they have forsaken my ordinances and my commandments and my festivals and my covenants and my Shabbats and my Kodesh place, which I have hallowed for myself in the midst, and my tabernacle and my sanctuary, which I have hallowed for myself in the midst of the land. And I should set my name upon it, that they should dwell there. And I will make mention to them in the high places and the groves and the images, and they will worship each his own graven image, so as to go astray. And they will sacrifice children to demons, and they will all into all the works of error in their hearts. And I will send witnesses in them, and they will witness against them, but they will not hear. And they will slay the witnesses also. And they will persecute who seek the Torah, and will abrogate and change everything so as to work evil before my eyes. And I will hide my face from them. Where do you hear that from? That's in Deuteronomy 32. I will hide my face from them. This is how you know the same thing by the witnesses by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let every word be established. This is how you know this is the same author. Make no mistake. And I will hide my face from them, and will deliver them into the hand of the Gentiles for captivity. Now, who that sound like? Don't sound like the people who run in the world. If they're supposed to be the Jews, they're supposed to be the children of the book, or the people of the book. The people who Moses led astray and were supposed to be in that land and are going through, I would consider the most tumultuous times that we've experienced in the last 2,000 years, bringing us face to face with absolute destruction. They can't be those people, because this scripture here tells us that these people will be delivered to the hand of the Gentiles for captivity. And it's called, last time I looked, they Gentiles. And for a prey and for devouring. You can't say Gentiles doesn't have anything to do with who you believe. Gentiles is a bloodline. This Gentiles infers heritage and genealogy. It's nothing to do with who you believe. It does at this point because they've always opposed the Most High. And we see that as per the sons of Noah, and how they immediately rebelled against him. He said, and for devouring, and I will remove them from the midst of the land. So this is the narrative that everybody should be following, not what we see here now by the people who by the sword can control the narrative. And I will scatter them amongst the Gentiles, and they will forget all my Torah and all my commandments and all my judgments, and will go astray as to new months and Shabbats and festivals and jubilees and ordinances. And this they will turn to me against the Gentiles. And after this, they will turn to me from amongst the Gentiles, which our people are doing now, with all their heart, and with all their soul, and with all their strength. And I will gather them from amongst all the Gentiles, and they will seek me. So I shall be found of them when they seek me with all their heart and with all their soul. Does that look like the people who are serving, supposedly are serving the Most High today? That they know the Most High and his righteousness and holiness with all their heart and soul? I don't think so. The violence that's spread in the land, and he talks about that in the prophecies, that they would shed innocent blood in that land. And he said, and I will disclose to them abounding peace with righteousness, and I will remove them the plant of uprightness, and with all my heart and with my soul. This is the Most High saying that he's going to do this with all his heart and soul. And they shall be for a blessing and not a curse. And they shall be the head and not the tail. Because right now we are certainly the tail. But let's get into that. And he said, I will build my sanctuary in their midst, and I will dwell to them. When they say, well, who wrote this? And I don't mean to just interrupt that, the flow of that. Just pose this question. The authenticity of that, how could this be, if we're looking at comparing apples to apples and what they found on the cuneiform and the translation of those and how we're expected to take that? Well, the same thing I believe the same energy and skepticism should be applied to this. But at the same time, the answer in terms of where you're getting it from, why it's such a complete narrative with absolute perfection, is because it tells you Moses is given the complete history from creation. From who? He says an angel of the presence. That's supposed to have been the angel that led them out of Egypt. He said he spoke to Moses according to Yahweh, saying, write the complete history of creation, how in 6 days with Almighty finished all his works, and how he created and kept Shabbat on the 7th day, and hallowed it for all ages, and appointed it for a sign for all his works. And then he goes through the whole days. And on the 3rd day, and he goes through the whole thing, and this is where we start with the concept of the Jubilees. Now he says then to Adam, let me see if he gives you the dates there. Maybe he starts to give you the dates in a minute. So let's go to the date. I hate this. Okay, here we go. He starts this. You see this? This is the first week in Jubilee, 1 to 7. So he's saying this is the first 7 years all of this testimony took place in. So it's not 50 years, but he's saying he's going literally to the beginning. Right? And he's saying that Cain, they went from the Garden of Eden, and he says in new month, and Adam knew his wife, and his wife went forth from the garden, and they dwelt in the land of Elder, in the land of their creation, which is really deep. And Adam called the name of his wife Eve, and they had no son till the first Jubilee, 8 a.m. Oh, that would be the 8th year of that particular Jubilee in that Jubilee. Well, anyway, let's skip down because it tells you here everything that takes place. And they remember the angel of the presence is recording this to him, and Moses is writing it down. So whoever, Catholic Church or whoever it is that has the original transcripts of this Paleo Hebrew or whatever it was they got it from, this is a reality that this was written down and recorded from his mouth. It doesn't matter about having the original one. That's what a lot of Gentiles and a lot of skeptics like to kind of point out, that they got the original one and everything was regurgitated or translated. Could have been with error, or some people made things up and sort of just kind of created their own stories, and a lot of it's mythology, and they mixed a lot of this with folklore and whatnot. And it's like, no, that can't be the truth, because we've always had what we call scribes. That's always been something that the children of Israel always had, which were people who were the basic, if you want to use that term, copying machines. They were the copiers. And they were strict about how they presented their product. If one jot or tittle was off, they would scrap the whole thing based on, if you want to look at the testimony of Dinah, which is called the Prince of the House of David. I encourage you to go look at that. Well, anyway, let's get down to the flood so we can get into the Sumerians, so we can get to the meat of what we're here with. So now let's go to the flood. Now here it is. He says, now on the new moon, So let's first of all, let's go back to when it happened. See this? So this is where he says, now there's nothing in heaven and earth, light or darkness. Okay, I'm skipping down, so bear with me. I'm trying to find some right with. He said, now he commanded Noah to make an ark, that he might save himself from the waters of the flood. And Noah made the ark in all respects as he commanded him. And in the 27th Jubilee of years, and in the 5th week of the 5th year, on the new month of the 1st month. And he tells you here, if you look in this in terms of 50-year intervals, he's saying that this is 1,307 years from the year that Adam was created, that when the flood took place. Let that sink in. So all of those living 900 years, having children probably anywhere between 60 years and 100 years old, overlapping basically up until Noah. So you're saying 1,300 years from Adam to Noah. And Noah was 500 years old when he went in the ark. He said, he entered in the 6th year thereof, in 1308. And in the new month, in the new month, the 2nd month to the 16th. And he entered in all that we brought into him, or brought to him into the ark. Yahweh closed from without on the 7th evening. So he said, Yahweh closed that ark up so it was airtight. And Yahweh opened 7 floodgates of heaven, and the mouths of the fountains of the great deep, 7 mouths in number. And the floodgates began to pour down water from the heaven 40 days. Think about torrential rain pouring down like we're getting now, that's dropping all these inches of water in one day, a year's worth of rain in one day. Think about that. He said, and the fountains of the deep also sent up waters. See that? The waters from the deep were sending up waters. This was a literal flood until the whole world was full of water. The whole world. It doesn't mince words here either. With no section and all this other stuff, like you hear a lot of harebrained theories. He said, and the waters increased upon the earth. 15 cubits did the waters rise above all the high mountains. So you're talking Mount Everest and Mount all of that. That was a lot of water. That was a lot of water. And the ark was lifted up above the earth, and it moved upon the face of the waters, and the waters prevailed on the face of the earth 5 months and 150 days. And the ark rested upon top of Lubar, one of the mountains of Ararat. See that now? So now let's go back to where all of this happened, to where now we could see. You see that? This is roughly where between Armenia and Turkey in Iraq, northern Iraq, and then down into that, and then down into this area. I don't know if you can see this. Maybe I can expand this a little bit. Nope, that takes you to a whole nother picture. Anyway, so Turkey is where Ararat rests. We all know that. That's without debate. Okay. Now he's telling you that on the new month, in the 4th month of the mountains of the great deep were closed and the floodgates of heaven were restrained. And on the new month of the 7th month, all the mouths of the abysses of the earth were open. And the water began to descend into the deep below. So he's telling you this is what happened to all of the water. And they all tell you that the water was still, the earth is made up of, I forget how many percentage in terms of the ratio of water to land. So we still know that there's enough water around here to even imagine that, especially looking at the deep and how undiscovered any of the deep are, even to this day. They're so busy looking for the moon and looking up there in space And we have no idea what's under in the waters. And nor should they even care anyway, because it's none of your concern anyway. Nothing in the water that really helps you on dry land. You know what I mean? Well, at any rate, because it's the abyss. That's why, have you ever seen that movie, The Abyss? That movie takes place in the waters. But anyway, I'm getting off. I digress. Well, anyway, he says, now in the new month of the third month, he went forth from the ark and built an altar on that mountain. And this was 1308. Remember that now. This is 1309 at this point. And he said, in the new moon, and he went forth from the ark, built an altar, and he made an atonement for the earth. And took a kid and made atonement by its blood for all the guilt of the earth. And for everything that he had on it had been destroyed, save those in the ark with Noah. So they were doing sacrifices and what we call sin offerings then. This proves it. Didn't begin with Noah. So that means before the Sumerians, this would have been the standard set in motion by Noah. So when you go back and you read the rebellion of the children of Noah and why he was admonishing the children of not just Israel, but all of the things that the children of Gentiles were doing and how they would lead everyone astray, he gets you into that mindset that the whole earth was set on a course, clean footing. The Most High destroyed the earth, restarted everything. And we went back to the same old things. The devil came and led astray everyone else again. Well, at any rate, he said he placed the fat thereof on the altar, and he took an ox and a goat and sheep and kids and salt and turtle dove and a dove. All of this is what Abraham offered. Same stuff. Dove, remember that? Well, that's when he got the vision of he was going to get the land. Well, not only that, it's Genesis 15:16. Let's go there. Right? Now he said it. He said he took a heifer 3 years old, she-goat, ram, and a turtle dove and young pigeon. So Noah was doing it, and then it passed on from Noah to Abraham. Then it went to Moses. And this is where he makes this profound prophecy. He says, unto Abraham, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them and afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge. And afterwards they shall come out with great substance. And people say, well, that's Egypt. Let's go to Egypt then. All right. Nope. That's let me get it right. Let me go to, there you go. Now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass at the end of 430 years, even the self same day it came to pass that all the hosts of the Elohim went out from the land of Egypt. And you notice he said sojourned. Let's look at Genesis. He said there'll be a stranger and they shall afflict them. Now you need to reevaluate your intellect if you can't distinguish affliction from sojourning. You got to remember, the Pharaoh gave Abraham Hagar, his daughter, who, as we know, brought forth the Ishmaelites. So the Arabs were birthed from him being the father of nations, and them being Shemites or Semites. see where I'm going? Now let's go back to Jubilees. Now it says now, we don't want to get into the Sumerians, where we're back at the flood, and he tells you now from 1309 to 1659, Noah, he said this whole festival was celebrating heaven from the day of creation to the days of Noah, 26 jubilees in 5 weeks of years. And Noah and his sons observed it for 7 jubilees and 1 week of years, 350 years, to the day of Noah's death. And from the day of Noah's death, his sons did away with it until the days of Abraham, and they ate blood. Now, if you read the story, go back, it tells you where Noah is admonishing them, and telling them, pray to them, and telling them not to eat blood. He said, do you command the children to eat no blood, so that their names and their seed may be before Yahweh, the sovereign ruler, continually. And this Torah, there is no limit of days, and there is forever. And there's blood significance in terms of blood sacrifice, blood, you know what I mean, vampirish crap and all that. You listen, you guys know what I'm talking about here. This is all dark sentences, evil. And he tells you here that after Noah's death, they went right back and abandoned all of the sacrifices and all of the righteousness that Noah had taught them. He says that they abandoned it, and they didn't pick it up again until the days of Abraham, which I just read it to you. He said, now Abraham observed it, and Yitzhak and Jacob and his children observed it for your days. And in your days, the children of Israel forgot it until you celebrated anew on this mountain. Just told you that as well. So he's telling you this thing never changed. That's why when they talk about the order of Melchizedek, and I don't want to get into that, him being Shem, Christianity's taking it into a whole new direction, but he's Shem. The book of the book of Yashar confirms that Melchizedek was Shem. Don't get it twisted. It wasn't because of the mother. He's saying that the priesthood had no mother or no father. People couldn't even distinguish that. But I'm getting off on a tangent again. I tend to do that from time to time. Well, at any rate, he says, let's go to the Feast of Weeks. I'm going to get into the Sumerians in terms of the rebellion. Remember, he said he told them not to eat blood. And he ordained them for himself as feasts for the generations forever. And they started worshiping other gods and new moons and all this other stuff like he prophesied that they would do. Now let's look at after the flood, he planted a vine. And this is where we get into the sons coming into it. And it says that he prepared the kid, did the sacrifice, because he says in the seventh week of the first year, you got to remember throughout those other blood or sacrifices he made, he didn't have any wine. He said, this in this Jubilee, Noah planted vines on the mountain. So that means in 1309, in this Jubilee here, 7 years later, or 9, 10, I guess roughly, 7 year or jubilee or a week of years. That would be 7 years. He said, in this Jubilee, Noah planted vines on the mountain on which the ark rests. That's Lubar again. That's Turkey, one of the Ararat mountains. So that means that Noah and all of his descendants and their children were all together on Mount Lubar. That's where they rested. It was dry, and I guess it was level enough for them to build housing and plant. You know how mountains is in Turkey. I don't know if you ever seen any of the footage or films or anything about that. Different kinds of geography shows or documentaries, whatnot. It's this place is welcoming to that kind of environment. It has that kind of environment that's common in that area. Well, anyway. He says now he said they produced fruit in the 4th year. So he planted this garden or this fruit, and he guarded the fruit and gathered it. And he guarded their fruit, and he gathered it in this year in the 7th month. And he made wine there and put it in a vessel and kept it until the 5th year. So that means after the flood, Noah was the first one doing wine. Let's get that straight right off the bat. Okay? So the Sumerians weren't weren't first in anything. All right? Now I wanted to show something that Noah could write. Okay, I want to find out where he says. He said, "Do you command it?" Okay, I'm going to find out where he said Noah wrote down himself. So, just kind of proving that Sumerians weren't the first to introduce writing, and in a way they were because they were the children of Noah. So yeah, we'll get into that. I mean, specifically because it's integral to this conversation, or to this study. And so he went back down. I know I'm moving fast. I hope this ain't messing with your eyes. Well, at any rate, he says after he placed and he did the sacrifice, he said he placed all their offerings and mingled it with oil upon it, just like Moses and Abraham did, and sprinkled wine on the fire, which he previously made on the altar. And he placed incense on the altar and caused a sweet savor to ascend to acceptable before Yahweh his ruler. Same thing Moses did. And he said, and it was evening when he went to his tent, and being drunken, he lay down and slept, and was uncovered in his tent as he slept. And Ham saw Noah, his father, naked. And this is where the story gets interesting. And he and Japheth, right? And he went forth and he told his 2 brethren without. And Shem took his garment and arose, and he and Japheth, and they placed the garment on their shoulders and went backward, because it's some, according to this Hebrew or I would imagine the Sumerian or Semitic law, the way it wasn't customary, or it was considered, a shame or something to uncover your father's nakedness or to see him naked. And he went backwards. So they put the clothes over him and walked backwards with it, and their faces were backwards, and they covered him. And Noah woke from his sleep and knew all that his younger son had done to him. And he cursed his son and said, "Cursed be Canaan, and enslaved servant shall he be to his brethren." So we look at that, and most people say, well, okay, well, he cursed Ham. No, he didn't say that. He said he cursed Canaan. And if you know anything about Canaan, particularly, let's look at the Hittites, just to get off that Ham lie that's been propagated throughout all of history, particularly through Christianity and all of those people who started all of these, studies that divide the race, anthropological, studies dealing with race and skulls and a bunch of crap. And they basically leave out all of this stuff, mind you. They leave out all of this in terms of Canaan and the distinction that Ham with Canaan, especially, he couldn't have been talking about Canaan if you're talking about black people, if he's saying that Cush was burnt, but yet, let's look at this. Cush was burnt, but yet Canaan, let's look at the Hittites, one of the Canaan tribes. All right. Hittites are Turkish. We can't dispute they were white people. Mycenaean and the whole 9 yards. They became the Assyrians, which became the Babylonians. And where they come into play is because of the, remember, and also after that, let's go to Genesis 6. He said, now there were giants in the earth in those days, when the sons of Yah came into the daughters of men, and they bare children of them, and they became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. And Yah saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that the ever imagination and thoughts of his hearts were only evil continually. And he repented that the Elohim, and he repented the Elohim that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. Now think about that now. He said, now there were giants on the earth in those days, and also after that. What does he mean by that? Well, let's look at this. Let's look at this where he talks about the children of Canaan, right? The Hivite, the Archite, the Sinite, the Arvadite, the Zemarite, the Hamathite. So it kind of gives you an idea when it comes to color, because particularly think about Hamath. It's a place called Hamath, right? It's Canaanite tribe. It's considered the land of Canaan. But it's Syria. Let's see if it'll give us that in. All right. See that? Walled. All right. Let's look it up and get to it. See that? A place in Syria. Mm-hmm. So the color situation is real vague right now in terms of our understanding, but we know something is off, and we'll get to that in a minute. We'll get to that in a minute. Well, at any rate, let's go back to the giant there. What was his name? Og? Let's go to Og. Let's see Og then. Okay. Okay. I even got a better one. Let's go to the Anak. In terms of the Anunnaki. Remember those guys? See that? He said, and there we saw. Let's make sure it's in there. Let's go to Numbers. This is Moses in the land. He says, now Caleb, he said, now the Amalekites, let me go back to that. Amalekites, dealing with Esau and how they're related to the Hittites, the Jebusites, Amorites. Because Amalek is Esau's firstborn. No, or grandson, rather, through Timnah. Now he says, there we saw giants, the sons of Anak. Now you see where they get Anunnaki? Excuse me. Which come of the giants. And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers. See that? Let's go back to the next one. 9:2. He says, hear, O ye, thou shalt pass over Jordan and go into possess nations greater and mightier than thyself, cities of great and fenced up to heaven, a people great and tall, a children of the Anakims, who thou knowest, of whom thou hast heard say, who can stand before the children of Anak? So now you see that there was a distinction between the children of Canaan. That's why he mentions this in Genesis 9, where he says that Ham is the father of Canaan. Why that was so important to mention that. Because the giants come through this land, through this lineage, rather. The Anunnaki. We call them the Anunnaki, but they were called the Anakims. And the Most High destroyed them all. And we'll get to that now, going back to the story and how all this ties in. Now, so let's go to this. Now, I want to go in there for some clarity, particularly about, let's go to the book of Yashar for this. Okay, now let's look at this. Okay, in this text, it tells you the relationship with Noah and how he lived. He was still a young man when Noah was alive. Noah was alive in his lifetime. And Noah lived 350 years after the flood. I'm trying to get to where Shem and to the story where we were talking about with Shem and where Shem had taken the skins from, going just capitalizing on the story from when Ham went in there and drunk the put the skins on. That's what it is. I don't want to waste time here because I've already wasted about 5 minutes unnecessarily. Now let's go to that. Okay. Now let's look at this. Did I pass it? Okay, here we go. Now listen, this is really deep now. Now he says that okay, let's see, is that no brought him to the ark? Oh, here we go. Now we got it. Now it says how that, and the garments of skins which Yahweh made for Adam and his wife, when they went out, this is the book of Yashar, by the way. Okay, you read about it in Joshua and Samuel. This is the book, another book written by Moses. And he says, now the garments of skin which Yahweh made for Adam and his wife when they went out to the garden were given to Cush. For after the death of Adam and his wife, the garments were given to Enoch, son of Jared. And when Enoch was taken up to Yahweh, he gave them to Methuselah, his son. And after the death of Methuselah, Noah took them and brought them to the ark, and they were with him until he went out of the ark. And in their going out, Ham stole these garments from his father. See that? Noah was sleeping when he was drunk, and he took them and hid them from his brothers. And when Ham begat his firstborn, Cush, he gave them garments in secret, and they were with Cush many days. And Cush concealed them from his sons and his brothers. And when Cush had begotten Nimrod, he gave those garments through his love for him. And Nimrod grew up, and when he was 20 years old, he put on those garments. And Nimrod became strong when he put on those garments. And Yahweh gave him the might and strength, and he was a hunter in the earth. Yeah, he was a mighty hunter in the field, and he hunted animals, and he built altars, and he offered upon them animals before Yahweh. So that means he was in right standing with the Most High at first. And Nimrod strengthened himself, and he rose up from amongst his brethren, and he fought the battles of his brethren against all their enemies round about. What enemies? The Canaanites. And Yahweh delivered all the enemies of his brethren into his hand, and Yahweh prospered them from time to time in his battles, and he reigned upon the earth. For it had become current in those days that when a man ushered forth those that he had trained up for battle, he would say to them, like Yahweh did to Nimrod, who was a mighty hunter in the earth, who had succeeded him in the battles and prevailed against his brethren. The Canaanites were literally his brethren. And he delivered them from the hands of their enemies. So Yahweh strengthened us and delivered us this day. And when Nimrod was 40 years old, at the time there was a war between his brethren and the children of Japheth. So they were power in those, and so that they were in the power of their enemies. Meaning, at this point, after Noah died, which is crazy, that they were considering each other enemies. And Nimrod went forth at the time, and he assembled all the sons of Cush and their families, about 460 men, and he hired some of his friends and acquaintances, about 80 men, and he gave them their hire, and he went with them to battle. And he was on the road, and Nimrod strengthened the hearts of the people that went with him. And he said to them, do not be afraid, nor be alarmed, for all our enemies will be delivered into our hands, and you may do with them as you please. And all the men were about 500. And they fought against their enemies, and they destroyed them and subdued them. And Nimrod placed standing officers over them in their respective places. And he took some of their children as security. And they were all servants to Nimrod and his brethren. And Nimrod and all the people that were with him turned homeward. And Nimrod had joyfully returned from battle after having conquered his enemies and all his brethren, together with those that knew him before, assembled them to make a king over them. And they assembled to make him king over them. And they placed a regal crown on his head. That's why you said the beginning of his kingdom was Akkad. Let's go into that, to the scriptures. Let's confirm that, because this is important to the story. Let's go into that. All right. Okay. And he said at the beginning of his kingdom was Babel. What the Tower of Babel was. Erech, Akkad, Kelna, in the land of Shinar. So most people are looking for the city of Shinar. There's no more Shinar. Of course, because it was considered the land there. All of this was that whole area we call Mesopotamia. Well, in antiquity, that was Shinar. And out of that land went forth Asher. Well, wait a minute, who's Asher? Asher's a Semite. That's one of Shem's sons. And Cush begat Nimrod. You see that? Now let's look at this. Let's go back to where he took the skins on, right? And they made him. He said, now Nimrod dwelt in Shinar. Now this is the beginning. This right here is the Sumerian culture right here. This is Sumeria. According to, let's look at it. See it? get it open? See it? This is Sumeria. Akkad, Amaru, Amorites. Remember that? Mm-hmm. This is where the battle begins. Ur of the Chaldees, where Abraham comes from. See that? So this is Sumeria. Sumer. Wickedata. Now let's bring that back. Now you see that? So let's go back and keep the story going. So now he had started this, right? Where he says now he was just righteous with the Elohim, right? Mighty hunter before him. And it says that after they put the crown on his head, he said that he was, now let's listen. He said, now he joyfully returned from battle and having conquered his and all his brethren together rose with those who knew him before, assembled to make him king over them. And they placed a regal crown upon his head. And he set over his subjects and peoples, princes, judges, and rulers, as to the customs among kings. And he placed Terah, the son of Nahor, the prince of his host, and he dignified him and elevated him above all his princes. And while he was reigning according to his heart's desire, after having conquered all his enemies around, he advised his counselors to build a city for his palace. And they did so. And they found a large valley opposite of the east. And they built him a large, extensive city. And Nimrod called the name of the city that he built Shinar. And Yahweh had vehemently shaken his enemies and destroyed them. So he's saying that Yahweh was also against these enemies, which was the giants. And we see that when the battle of the kings, when it came to the Sodom and Gomorrah and all of that. Mm-hmm. Remember, Nimrod and the kings went out. He says, now, let's get into that in a minute. But right now, he says he dwelt in Shinar and he reigned securely. And he fought with his enemies and subdued them, and he prospered in all his battles, and his kingdoms became very great. And all the nations and tongues heard of his fame, and they gathered themselves to him, and they bowed down to the earth, and they brought him offerings. And he became their Lord and king. And they all dwelt with him in the city of Shinar. And Nimrod reigned in the earth over all the sons of Noah. And they were all under his power and counsel. And all of the earth was of one tongue and one words of union. But Nimrod did not go in the ways of Yahweh. He was more wicked than all the men that were before him. And all the days of the flood until those days. And he made gods of wood and stone. And he bowed down to them. And he rebelled against Yahweh and taught all his subjects and his people of the earth his wicked ways. And Mardon, his son, was more wicked than his father. Now you see in this? Nimrod started the wickedness. But more importantly, this land here, let's get into that. Because you really won't get it until you understand, as it talks about Shem, and how it went from Shem as Melchizedek to Abraham. That's what is meant by the order of Melchizedek. It's an order. It's a kingly priesthood order. Whereas Noah was king and priest, Shem was king and priest. Nimrod was a king and priest, but you see it skipped all of his reign. And his son, which I can get into if you want, his son, Shem's son, or Abraham's son rather, or his grandson, that would have been Esau, he kills Nimrod because it was prophesied by the Shemites that a descendant of Abraham would rise up and kill him. and basically subdue the kingdom. And which is real deep, because this is all a prophecy that was basically to cover over a large, over a period of time when it got to the kingdom of the Israelites, and how after David established his kingdom, and him and Solomon, they were the king of the world. That was the kingdom that was over the whole earth at that time. Every kingdom on earth at that time of David and Solomon paid tribute to the kingdom of Israel, without exception. Don't get it twisted. That's why in all of the history that we hear, Israel and in terms of David and Solomon conveniently left out. Picks up again when Israel is getting overthrown and the Most High sent Assyria and the kingdoms of who the remnant of these people. So let's get into it. Because first of all, we don't understand with kingdom that him being the first king, Nimrod, him being the first king over the land that was given to Shem. You guys can look at the, and we'll go back to that real quick, and I'll go to it in a second. We'll also go back to Jubilees. He said, now Jubilees, he said, now after he took the skins, I have proved to you about the skins and why he went in there. So everybody that tells you about that lie, about how Ham had molested Noah, which is so perverted, disgusting. He had perverted himself and went in there and slept with his father. Are you kidding me? He went in there and got them skins. And then he gave him to Nimrod, and then Nimrod became strong with him. So strong that he took over and subdued all of the sons. And they made him king over him. That would be the sons of Ham and the sons of I'm assuming all of the sons, except for the Canaanites. Now he saw this, and he took the skins, and he left, and he hid them. Remember, he said he kept them for many days and gave them to and gave it to Japheth, excuse me, and he gave it to Nimrod, and Nimrod did what he did, built the Tower of Babel, the whole nine. You remember it. Now he says, now Ham knew that his father had cursed his younger son. And he was displeased that he cursed his son, and he parted from his father. See, now you see him where they all start to separate. And he and his sons with him. This is going back. I'm going back before Nimrod and that story kind of takes place. And I'm going back to Ham and them and how everything gets started. And he says that he and his sons with him, Cush and Mizraim, Put and Canaan. And he said he went and built himself a city and called its name after his wife, Neelatama Neelatama. And Japheth saw it, and he became envious of his brother, and he too built himself a city and called the name after called it after the name of his wife, Atatanesis. And Shem all dwelt with his father. So let's get that straight. Shem didn't leave. Said Shem dwelt with his father, and he built a city close to his father on the mountain. And he called its name after the name of his wife, Sadakatikalagbab. That's a serious name, man. That's a tongue twister. You can't even say that one time, much less 3 times fast. Anyway, he said, behold, these 3 cities are near Mount Lubar. Okay? He said, Sedekwatilabab is on the east. Nelatalakuk, where Adonais is, that's what Japheth, that's towards the west, which would be towards Turkey, the mainland where we get to Mycenaean territory and the Hittites land okay, you see that? And these are the sons of Shem. So he was in the west. Let's look at that. Let's clarify that now. He dwelt with his father Shem, and all of these cities are on the east. A Seteliquacab, which would have been Shem, and Adonijah is towards the west, and I'm assuming Ham was towards the north or towards the south. Doesn't really say that. Doesn't really say that. He built himself a city and called it name. Okay, and he cursed his sons. Unless I'm missing that real quick. And it doesn't tell you where the location of that is. Well, at any rate, he said, now all these three cities are near Mount Lubar, fronting the mountain on its east. Okay, that's on the south, which would have been Ham, and Adonijah towards the west. Okay? So let's go back to that. And he says, now these three things came to flood upon the earth. Now, this is when he first listened. I'm skipping ahead. I know I'm driving you crazy with the skipping around. He says, now the 28th Jubilee, Noah began to enjoin upon his son the ordinances and commandments and the judgments that he knew. And he exhorted his sons to observe righteousness and to cover the shame of their flesh and to bless their creator and to honor father and mother and love thy neighbor and guard their souls from fornication and uncleanness with all iniquity. So they knew better. For owing to these three things came the flood upon the earth, namely owing to the fornication where the watchers against the Torah after their ordinances went whoring after the daughters of men and took themselves wives of all they choose. And they made a beginning of uncleanness. And they begat the Naphidim. And they were all unlike. And they devoured one another. And the giant slew the Nephil, which I'm assuming is the Nephilim. And the Nephilim slew the Eljo, and the Elju mankind. And one man another. And he's saying that this is what brought the flood. And they're saying that now that they do this, Noah's telling them that, and we were left, and I and you, he says, and yo what? He says his admonition. Let me read it and get it right. After this, they sinned against the beast and the birds and all that moves and walks on the earth. And much blood was shed on the earth. And every imagination and desire of men imagine vanity and evil continually. And Yahweh destroyed everything from off the face of the earth because of the wickedness of their deeds. And because of the blood which they had shed in the midst of the earth, he destroyed everything. And we were left, I and you and my sons, and everything that entered with us into the ark. And behold, I will see your works before me, that you do not walk in righteousness. For in the path of destruction you have began to walk, and you are parting one from another. And my sons, each with his brother. For I see, and behold, demons have begun their seductions against you and against your children. And now I fear on your behalf that after my death, you will shed blood on the earth, and that you too will be destroyed from the face of the earth. For whoso sheds man's blood, and whoso eats the blood of any flesh, shall all be destroyed from the earth. This is his last will and testament. And there shall not be left any man that eats blood, or sheds the blood of man on the earth, nor shall there be left to him any seed or descendants living under heaven. For into Sheol, hell, shall they go, and into the place of condemnation shall they descend. So it's all BS if they tell you that the Most High, Shem and Adam and all of them didn't know about hell and destruction. And into the darkness of the deep shall they all be removed by a violent death. He said, so there shall see no blood seen upon you of all the blood there shall be all of the days, and you have killed, and there shall be no blood seen upon you of all the blood there shall be all the days in which you have killed any beast or cattle or whatever flies on the earth, and work you a good work in your souls by covering that which has been shed on the face of the earth. That was a mouthful. Well, at any rate, after that, he died. He divided the earth. So let's get down to where he divided the earth after all that we've learned so far. He says, for Shem's lot came the middle of the earth. And how we think that that's important, because the middle of the earth in this context was before what we see of in Shem. Let's go to a little caveat here in Shem. Well, let's look at the days of Peleg. Oops. Right? Righty. He said, in Eber were born two sons. One was Peleg, for in his days the earth was divided. You see that? His days the earth was divided. Now, people could say that would mean that they gave out the allotments. No, I don't necessarily think so, because I'm looking at a study now. You guys can look at it at your own leisure, where they find in a ridge at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean that shows that the continents were separated. Because when you look at the map of all of the nations or all the continents on the earth, they all look like they fit together in one piece. It's almost like a puzzle that's been separated, and you push them all together. You can see how the contours kind of ergonomically sit in there in each one of them. You push them together, you'll see that they all fit perfectly. It was one landmass. And it's been proven now scientifically. I was watching Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about it on one of his little videos, but I digress. Okay, now we see this. So let's go back to that. He said, now Shem's lot was the middle of the earth. And he said he went from the mountain range of Rapha, the mouth between the water Tina, which you can't recognize any of these lands now. You're looking at the description. You're right. And he's saying that, he said, and his portion gorged toward the west through the midst of the river as it extends till it reach the water of the abysses, and out of which this water goes forth and pours its waters into the Sea of Meot, which I would consider to be the Mediterranean. And his river flows into the Great Sea. And all that is toward the north is Japheth. Now let's go into that a little bit. Let's go into that a little bit more. He said, and he knew that a blessed portion and a blessed had come to Shem and his sons for the generations forever, for the whole land of Eden and the whole land of the Red Sea and the whole land east of India. All right? And he said, in the mountains thereof, and all the land of Bashan, and all the land of Lebanon, and all the islands of Caphtor, and all the mountains of Sinir and Amana, and the mountains of Asher in the north, and all the land of Elam. See that? Let's go back into that where we was just looking at that. Elam. This is the land between the rivers. See that? They don't use Elam in this one. That's why a lot of people, Akkad, you do get Akkad though. Well, anyway, let's go back. So we're seeing now that this land, right? The whole land of Eastern and all the land of Lebanon and Caphtor. Remember the Philistines come from Caphtor. Remember that? That's Gaza. And all the mountains of Sinir and Amana, and the mountains of Ashur in the north, and the land of Elam, Asher, and Babel. and Susan. So, and all the mountains of Ararat and all the region beyond the sea, which is beyond the mountains of Ashur towards the north. You got that? So let's get this straight then. We're saying that the land that was given, that Nimrod considered his first kingdom, this is where it gets deep. Where Nimrod had his first kingdom, where was that at again? Is that 9? Nope, it was 10. I just passed it. Right? The beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. So why was he given land over Shem's land? Conveniently after died, remember they put the skins on him. He ruled over land that was given to Shem. That should rock you to your core. To when he put on those skins, the children of Shem went against, and this is where this thing gets really deep, because I have been kind of holding this back until this, so you can get an idea. Let's look at Shem. So now it'll come into clarity as to who the Sumerians was and why they were so, in terms of the Anunnaki and Enlil and Inkli and all the things we're hearing about, because he ruled over all the earth, Nimrod. And he set up these altars and these pagan rituals and worshiped the demons and the whole nine. Now let's look at that. All right. Let's go to 10. These are the generations of Shem. Now let's look at this. Shem's name meant shame. Think about that. The Most High said blessed was Shem. Right? And blesses his household. But as soon as Noah died, they abdicated their authority and gave it to Nimrod, putting Shem to shame. Let's look at the etymology of his word, of his name then. Right? He says, through the idea of definite and conspicuous position, compare Shemaiah, which is deep. He says, but this is where it comes from, a primitive word. Think about what he's saying here. Shem comes from a primitive word, perhaps rather from this word, sum. See that, guys? Herein is your Sumerians. They even Shemites in your face all the time. The root word of Shemites or Sumeria is Sum, which is the name for the Shemites. That's why Abraham came out of Ur of the Chaldees and from under Nimrod's rule. So how does that prove anything about the black man? Let's look at this. First, let's look at this situation here. Well, we'll get into the Hittite situation where I ain't even gonna go there. To come to think of it, let's go to this battle that they had. Nimrod builds the city in the tower. You see that? And he said, these are the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begat Arpachshad after 2 years after the flood. And Shem lived after he begat Arphaxad 500 years. He lived 500 years. I'm just froze on that. I pondered that for a minute. 5.5 years. 500 years, man. Ain't that something? Okay. So we see that Abraham, Nahor, this is the genealogy. And he said, before Haran died, his father, Terah, in the land of his nativity, Ur of the Chaldees. So Abraham was born in Ur of the Chaldees, which is right here, Nimrod's land. So let's go to that battle. Now, there was a battle that happened, I'm assuming this would have been when Abraham, I should have had that pretty much prepared for that. But I want to go to where him and they had to fight. Is that 20? Is that 20? Okay. Nope, that's not that one. This is where Nimrod let me go into intercedes for Sodom. Yeah, it is. Oh, he has interceded for him. That's not the same as them fighting them. I guess that would have been 16 then, where he went and he fought them. Is it 17? I don't want to waste time on this, but this is kind of important in terms of who they were fighting against. The kingdom of, when it comes to the Canaanites and the whole 9 yards. Here we go. And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel. Let's look at that real quick. I got to throw y'all for a loop on this one. All right. Okay. And Nimrod dwelt in Babel, and he there renewed his reign over the rest of his subjects, and he reigned securely. And his subjects and princes of Nimrod called his name Amraphel, saying that at the tower his princes and his men fell through his means. Let that sink in. So Amraphel, king of Shinar, which is Nimrod, him with Arioch, king of Elasar, Shadaliamar, king of Elam, entitled king of the nations. These made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and Bersha, king of Gomorrah, and Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemeber, king of Zeboim. And let's look at some of these. All right? Look at who these people were. Sodom means to scourge, to scorch. Burnt or volcanic bituminous district. Wow. That's deep. I wonder what it was named before that. Okay, Bersha. This meant Aram. Let's see where it comes from. To disturb, violate. Sheesh. Zeboim, prominence as a gazelle, beautiful, beautiful, gloriously. Okay, he says like gazelles. So that means that they were some really, in terms of the giants or whatever, they were some really strange looking characters. Okay. Shemeber, pinion, a wing. Gomorrah, Amaru. So you see that? Gomorrah is really Amora. Amar, where we get Amorite. Huh? And if you go to southern where Jordan and southern Israel, and that being the land of Canaan, it's there. Now he says, now as he was going to war with them, he said all these were joined together in the veil of, in the what they call the Vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. In 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer and the kings with him and smote the Rephaim in Ashtaroth. Let's look at who they were. Right? Right? Rapha, to mend, physician, repair, to cure, but that's not, I guess that's where they get it from. But in sense of invigorating, a giant. Okay, this is the right one then. House of the Giant. And he says the symbol of a deity, Ashtaroth. We know that from Ishtar and the whole nine. Mm-hmm. So Nimrod and his boy Shinar and his boy Amraphel, king of Shinar, this was part of their battles where they destroyed these giants. That's why I said that they got rid of them for the Most High. The Susans, right? Let's look at where the Susans is. Conspicuous, fullness of the breast, a moving creature. Who? Zuzim. He says the Suzims and Ham and the Emims. The Emims would mean fright, terrible, as a bugbear, dread, horror, idle, terror. Ooh. So the Emims were terrors, an early Canaanitish or Moabitish tribe. Huge. And then Nimrod joined with them and fought them, and they destroyed them all. And let's look at that a little deeper. And he says now, they destroyed all of them, and they smote the Rephaims and the Horites. Let's look at the Horites. So all of these apparently had an alliance. And the Horites, cave dweller or troglodyte, the original Idumeans. Sheesh. Says it means, and Horite meant a cavity, a socket. Get a little deeper with that. A crevice of a serpent, a cell, the cell of a prison. Oh my goodness. You guys hear that? These were the people Chedorlaomer and Nimrod were destroying. So they got the story twisted. The Anunnaki was destroyed by the Sumerians. Huh? Serious business. All right? Now they went, and then they went to Sodom, which tells you that apparently Sodom and Gomorrah was some half-breed people too. And he said, with Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, entitled king of the nations, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king, 4 with 5. And they fought. And he says that they killed these in Mount Seir. These are the people that Esau, I believe, if he was the one that killed Nimrod, it was revenge because of this. Him killing his people after he forsook his birthright with the Israelites, or with Abraham and Shem, his heritage. And the reason why Canaanite is so important is because of this very reason right here in terms of etymology. Cain, the first murderer, where the Messiah said Cain was a murderer the devil was a murderer from the beginning. Well, the devil never murdered nobody in heaven. So who was he talking about if Cain committed the first murder? See that? See my point? And think about the etymology. Cain, Canaan, and the Most High told him that he said that he was going to put, listen to this. He slew his brother, and he said that Elohim said, therefore, whoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Elohim set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. Now, there's a book called the Book of Adam and Eve, which supposedly is another book that comes from a library called the Cave of Treasures, and it's supposed to be another book written by Moses. Hey, the angels told him everything, and each book had a different context and gave a different angle of story and creation, one by war, one by the spiritual end, one by the Elohim, a book with genealogical matters. I mean, the Most High is thorough. Well, in any way, Cain was promised that his seed would be preserved through the flood. And who do you think his seed was preserved through? In this book, first, let me say that his name was, in terms of Cain, in this book of Adam and Eve, he says that his mark was when he got mad and killed his brother, that his face became red. And that's where the pale skin, I don't even know if it's pale, but I know it became red to show the blush and the red when he got angered and then get embarrassed. And they said that was a mark that he placed on him. And that's why the original Hittites and all that, when you think about redness and how that it plays in with being pale and, I don't even want to get into that, but you guys hear where I'm going. Well, Cain is the descendants of the Canaanites are the descendants of that Cain. Because Cain was the ones, in terms of the giants, they went and slept with the children of Cain. That's the deep part about it. And it had to have been a mark distinguishing them, especially as I look at the Hittites, as opposed to the black-headed ones. I'm reaching over stuff, so I can't type the way I want to real quick, but okay, let me go back and, because I don't want to get into it, because I read it and went way over. Probably people are not even going to stay around to watch all of this. Hopefully you will. You get a lot. It's a lot of meat in it. Look, Hittites appearance. Red hair, as per the merging with Esau and all of that. See that? They were the Canaanites. Most people never link Cain to Canaan. And if the world was spoken into existence, then the emphasis should never be on what's written anyway, in terms of how we identify. That's the way that they're able to lose traces, like but going back with Sim. Because of translations and things being written and how people can manipulate that, you never even get a chance to see, how Shem is the Sumerians. Shem being the Sumerians. Sum. Can't make this up. And that showed the distinction of these people mixing with the giants. Because you got to remember, the disembodied spirits after the giants, they died, part angel, part man. They died in the flood or by the clash of the titans, whichever history you want to go with, or both. They became the evil spirits on the earth. You read the book of Enoch, it tells you the whole story. So if these disembodied spirits merged with the children of Noah after the flood, they became the Canaanites. That's why Noah couldn't bless Ham, Shem, and Japheth. They were blessed because they made it through the flood. But the Most High, in his discernment, in his prophetic vision and insight, he knew that Cain would be doing what he did historically before it actually happened. And he cursed him because they mixed with the giants and continued that after the flood. That's why their distinction. That's where we get these pigment issues with white and black. I'm just not going to lie to you. You say, well, that doesn't prove anything about black. Well, let's go to the scriptures real quick, and then I'm going to close this out. Okay? Then I'm going to close this out. Let's go to the scriptures of that. Let's go to Job. You want to see some stuff? Let's go to Job. Job says, my skin is black. There's no allegory there. No euphemisms. Skin means skin. He said, my skin is black, and my bones are burned with heat. Huh? Let's go to Song of Solomon. He says, I am black. Solomon, David's son. But comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem. Oh, he said, these are daughters singing. Get out of here. He says, as the tents of Kedar. Well, who was Kedar? Let's look that up. Who was Kedar? Kedar is the firstborn of Ishmael. This is new. Let's look at that for a second. Let's look at that for a second. Remember, Abraham, Ishmael got Hagar from Egypt, right? Let's look at that. This is his firstborn, Nebaioth. Noob. It's where we get the term Nubia. See that? This is where we get the term Nubia. This is then Kedar, dusky. Dusky. Kedar, a dark colored. Be black. Huh? You can't play with this. You can't play with this. He is as the tents of Kedar. He said, look not upon me because I am black, because the sun has looked upon me. The sun is what gives you color. The sun is what will darken you. Are you getting this? Let's look at Jeremiah 5:10. Right? Wait a minute. Am I in the wrong spot here? I'm in the wrong spot here. Let me go into that. All right. 5:11. Was I right there and didn't see it? Nope. All right. Well, let's look at that. Okay. Here we go. He said, the word of Elohim came to Jeremiah concerning the dirt. And Judah mourneth. This is the original Hebrews, the Yehudi. And the gates thereof languish. They are black unto the ground. Meaning they black as dirt. And the cry of Jerusalem is going up. You see that? Look at Lamentations. That's where I meant 5:10. Our skin was black like an oven because of the terrible famine. White people don't get black when there's a famine. You're kidding me? And look at Moses. Cush means Ethiopia. Ethiopia means Cush, right? Huh? Am I right? Well, Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman he married. I'm going to end this here because this everything ain't what it seems, people. And I hope this study finds you well. I went way over what I had planned to do, but I appreciate y'all standing in there with me. And may the Most High bless you and bless your ears and bless your heart that you receive this with truth and humility. And in Yahushua's name, we give thanks for his word to be able to receive the real meaning and the intended meaning of his scriptures. We thank him and his Holy Spirit for revealing these truths to us. And I'll say shalom.